Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
At 7 o'clock in the morning, my wife was out in the driveway, washing her car again. A 1965 yellow Corvette convertible I'd bought her for our 25th wedding anniversary. It was meant to be a special gift, and I'd hoped it would be worth the $20,000 price tag. I couldn't have been more wrong. Megan had been having an affair with a guy from my office complex. She thought she was being discreet, but that was far from the truth. Her meetings with him were careless, and he couldn't keep his mouth shut. I learned what was happening when I started noticing the knowing smirks and whispered jokes from some of the guys in the break room. It didn't take much to piece it all together. Victor Harlan had been enjoying more than just casual lunches with my wife, and he was openly bragging about it. Their affair had been going on for over 6 weeks. I'd confronted Megan about the rumors twice, making it clear that I wanted whatever was happening between her and Victor to stop. Each time, she flatly denied it and acted deeply offended that I would even question her loyalty after 25 years of marriage. We got married right out of high school, and looking back now, I realize we were just too young. Maybe it was puppy love, or just an impulsive teenage crush, but whatever it was coming to an end. We had one daughter, Diane, a high school senior on the verge of graduating. In less than a month, she'd be leaving for Iowa State University. Over the years, I'd had my share of chances to stray, but I'd held back, determined to keep the marriage intact. Now, it felt like that effort had been for nothing. If it weren't for Victor's big mouth, I might never have known about Megan's affair. The thought gnawed at me. Had this happened before, and I'd been too blind or too trusting to see it? I'd always believed in her, never questioning her loyalty. Victor typically took Wednesdays off, and I had a hunch Megan would spend as much time preparing herself for the day as she was obsessing over her cherished car this morning. "Dad, are you dropping me off on your way to work?" Diane's voice brought me back to the moment. She was ready to leave, so I drained the rest of my coffee and grabbed my keys. As we headed out the door, I paused next to Megan, who was still fussing over the Corvette in the driveway. "This is the last time I'm bringing it up. Stop seeing Victor Harlan." My tone was firm. She shot me a cold, sharp glare. "For the last time, Eric, there's nothing going on between me and Victor. Whoever's feeding you this crap is just trying to get under your skin. Stop working yourself up over something that isn't happening." Megan turned back to drying her car, ignoring me completely. I stood there for a moment, staring at her, before shaking my head and walking to the car. As I backed out of the driveway, the silence inside was heavy. Diane stared out the window, clearly upset. "What's wrong?" I asked, breaking the tension. "Why are you being so moody?" Without turning to look at me, she replied, "Dad, how long are you going to let her get away with this? It's been going on for a while now, and I'm having a really hard time dealing with it. Honestly, I'm as disgusted with you for not doing anything as I am with her for what she's doing. Thank God I'm leaving in a couple of weeks." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I gripped the wheel tighter. "What are you talking about? What exactly is it that you're putting up with? Is your mother doing something at home I don't know about?" "No, Dad. It's Margie Harlan. She's been dumping on me every day about my 304 mom, stealing her dad away from their family. Her parents have been divorced for over a year, but she only started going off on me about 3 weeks ago. Apparently, her mom knows all about what's going on between Mom and Mr. Harlan and complains about it constantly at home. Margie's life is a mess, and she's taking it out on me." I felt my stomach churn. The situation was worse than I'd thought, and now it was dragging Diane into the middle of the mess. "Sorry, I didn't realize you were catching heat over this," I said, guilt creeping into my voice. "I've asked your mother 3 times to stop, and every time, she's just denied it. I'll handle it today, I promise." Diane gave me a look that said she didn't believe a word of it. "Thanks for the ride. Anyway, Dad." She closed the car door and walked toward the school, her shoulders stiff with frustration. Watching her disappear into the building, I knew it was time to end this mess once and for all. I knew exactly where Victor Harlan lived. After his divorce, his ex-wife had taken the kids and moved in with her parents. Victor had tried to sell their house, but the mortgage left him too underwater to make it work. Between alimony and child support, he was barely scraping by to keep up the payments. For the past month, I'd been steering clear of the office break room to avoid the smug remarks and veiled digs at my expense. This morning, I stopped at a coffee shop on the way in, a small attempt to steady myself before facing the day. Once I arrived, I made sure to be seen, exchanging a few words with coworkers to confirm my presence. Then I told my secretary, Helen, that I'd be tied up in meetings on the 3rd floor over lunch and for the rest of the day. She promised to hold my messages until I returned. It was almost too easy to slip out the back door, slide into my car, and drive away. I parked down the street from Victor Harlan's house and waited. It didn't take long, about 20 minutes, before Megan's Corvette pulled up. To my disgust, she had her own garage door opener for his place. She drove in, and the door closed behind her as if she belonged there. I waited another 30 minutes, letting the minutes drag by until I was sure they'd be settled inside. Then, I got out of my car and casually walked up to the house. The side door to the garage was unlocked, just as I'd hoped. No one saw me slip inside. Megan's Corvette sat there with the convertible top down, parked alongside Victor's little BMW. One of those Z cars, or something like that. I didn't know much about cars, but I could tell it was pricey. Megan had left her purse sitting on the seat of the Corvette, a careless little detail that only fueled my anger. I could have barged into the house, caught them red-handed, and confronted them in the act. But that wasn't my plan. I didn't need to see it to know it was true. My eyes fell on a 5-gallon can of gasoline near Victor's lawnmower. It was full enough to do the job. Carefully, I poured gasoline over both cars, soaking the interiors and drizzling the rest around the shop's storage area. When I was done, I struck a match and tossed it. The fumes ignited instantly, and flames began to lick at the cars and walls. By the time they realized what was happening, it would be too late to save anything. I moved quickly, slipping out of the garage and heading back to my car. As I turned the corner, I caught a glimpse of thin wisps of smoke rising in my rearview mirror. My heart pounded, but I stayed calm, driving back to work as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later, I walked into the office and told Helen the meeting had been canceled. I settled back at my desk, the picture of normalcy. It was as though I'd never left the building. When I got home, Diane was in the living room watching TV. Megan was nowhere to be found, and Diane had no idea where she was. A wave of unease crept over me. Had the two of them been trapped in the house, overcome by smoke, burned alive? Or were they at a hospital, being treated for injuries? Regret began to gnaw at me when the phone rang. It was Megan's sister, Nicole. "Hi, Eric. It's Nicole. I just wanted to let you know Megan is over at my place. She had an accident with the Corvette. She's fine, but the Corvette is completely wrecked. She's a little shaken up and can't talk right now. I'll bring her home later tonight, and she can explain everything then. Do you want us to come and pick her up?" I asked, trying to sound concerned. "No, Eric. She's really upset, and I think it's best if she stays here for a while. I'll bring her home later when she's feeling better. She's sorry about the car." "Okay. Do you know where the car is now?" "I'm not sure. I think it was towed to a lot somewhere. Megan can fill you in when she gets home." "Thanks, Eric. I knew you'd understand." When I hung up, I couldn't stop the grin that spread across my face. Diane noticed but didn't say a word. Instead, she gave me a knowing smile, and we both turned back to the TV. "I think you should take my car and drive over to Aunt Nicole's place," I suggested. "Your mom had an accident with the Corvette and doesn't seem ready to talk to me about it. Maybe you could offer to help, and while you're there, quietly find out what happened. I'd love to know, but I can't exactly ask her myself. Just a thought, if you're interested." "You know I am," Diane said, her eyes lighting up. "Hand over the keys. Should I bring her back home, or leave her there?" "Surprise me," I replied with a smirk. She laughed lightly as she grabbed the keys and walked out the door. The house was quiet again, and I settled in for an evening with a cold beer and the TV. A couple of hours later, Diane came back, her grin even wider than when she left. "I didn't think you had it in you," she said, clearly amused. "You're one rotten son of a bitch, Dad, and I absolutely love it." I played it cool, careful not to give anything away. Whatever conclusions Diane reached were hers alone. "Where's the car?" I asked casually. "No clue," she replied. "Apparently, it can't be moved until the insurance company takes a look." Mom didn't want to talk about it and was dodging all my questions. "Where's your mom now? Why didn't you bring her back with you?" "It seems she's nervous about how you're going to react," Diane said. I asked her to explain what happened, but she got flustered. "Nicole mentioned she'd be staying there for a few days until things settle down, whatever that means." I tried pressing for more details, but neither of them gave me any answers. "Well, I hope you don't have any questions for me, because I'm not answering them either," I replied with a raised eyebrow. "Good call, Dad," Diane said with a chuckle. "I don't want to know anything more. I'll wait for the next chapter." With that, she headed to bed, and I grabbed another beer. Everything seemed to have fallen into place perfectly. The next day at work felt different. The usual breakroom crew wasn't making any snide comments, and a few of them seemed to be avoiding me altogether. My secretary, Helen, was unusually attentive, going out of her way to be helpful. One person who didn't show up at all was Victor Harlan. I didn't ask about him, and no one volunteered any information. Around midday, a small bouquet of daisies arrived at my desk. The attached note simply read, "Thank you." Victor's ex-wife's name was Linda Harlan. I couldn't think of anyone else with those initials. Helen caught sight of the flowers and the note and started smiling every time she glanced in my direction. While I was amused by how quickly Linda seemed to connect the dots, it did leave me slightly uneasy. If she figured it out that fast, would the police? When I got home, Diane seemed to be in a good mood. She mentioned that Margie Harlan had apologized for her behavior over the past few weeks, though nothing else was discussed between them. Later, I noticed a small article buried in the back of the newspaper about a house fire that destroyed 2 vehicles. That was all it said, just a brief, factual note. Diane also told me that Nicole had called her earlier on her cell phone, letting her know that Megan would be staying with her for a few more days. We decided not to dwell on it and went out for sushi instead, enjoying a relaxing evening together. Friday morning brought an unexpected visit from the police at my office. They wanted to discuss the fire at Victor Harlan's house. We spoke privately in my office, and they also questioned Helen. She told them I'd been at work all day on Wednesday, conveniently omitting the brief period I'd been upstairs. What struck me was how seamless her account matched mine, even though we hadn't coordinated. The officers confirmed the fire was an act of arson, but admitted they had little to go on. Interestingly, they carefully avoided mentioning my wife or her connection to the situation, which I found curious. Even more puzzling was Helen's decision to cover for me. Without hesitation, she had stuck her neck out. On Saturday, Diane took care of the laundry and housework while I tackled the yard. That evening, we ordered a pizza and rented a pay-per-view movie. We both avoided any mention of the fire or the drama surrounding it, silently agreeing to focus on lighter things. I couldn't help but admire how mature my daughter had become through it all. Megan came home on Sunday wearing clothes that her sister, Nicole, had given her. I considered asking where her own clothes were but decided against it. She spent most of the day in her room, keeping to herself. Diane prepared supper for the 3 of us, but Megan barely ate and seemed withdrawn. The topic of the Corvette, or anything related to recent events, remained unspoken. That night, I slept on the couch. By Monday morning, the atmosphere at work had shifted. Helen was in high spirits, and the usual group of sarcastic jokesters had all but vanished. Many of the male employees seemed to avoid making eye contact with me, which I found amusing. As for Victor, he had taken a week of vacation, leaving his absence as another piece of the puzzle. I contacted my auto insurance agent and asked them to stop by the house to collect the necessary information for the Corvette's claim directly from Megan. I made sure not to say anything that would hint I knew more than I should. Conveniently, I happen to know that when a car burns up in a garage, it falls under the homeowner's insurance rather than the auto policy. That meant Victor's insurance company would likely have to cover the cost of Megan's car. I was curious to see how this would all play out. Both the arson investigation team and the insurance company confirmed that the fire was indeed set intentionally. After reviewing Victor Harlan's financial situation, the insurance company decided to deny the claims unless he could prove he wasn't responsible for the fire. They suspected that the fire might have been set to benefit him financially, giving him a potential motive. The police shared the same suspicion, but they still needed solid proof to accuse him directly. When I got home, Diane was there alone. She handed me a note from Nicole, explaining that she had taken Megan to the doctor for some sedatives and that Megan would be staying at her house for a few more days. There were some papers from the insurance agent on the coffee table, but I didn't bother looking at them. Diane and I decided to go out for dinner at Red Lobster. Officially, I still had no idea where Megan's car was or what had happened to it. All I knew was that the Corvette had been destroyed in the fire. It struck me as odd that no one was providing any clear answers. The next morning, I made a quick call to Nicole. "Hi, it's Eric. I just wanted to say I appreciate everything you're doing for Megan." "Thanks, Eric. I think she needs to stay here a little longer. The doctor gave her some pretty strong medication. I'm fine with that. I just have 2 questions. I understand her car was involved in a fire, and I'd like to know where it was when the fire started and why it was there. Call me later today with answers to both of those questions. If I don't hear from you or get a response, I'll be bringing all of Megan's belongings over to your house tonight. Do you understand?" "Eric, under the circumstances, I think you're being unreasonable. Megan's under a lot of stress right now. This isn't going to help her. I'm not expecting answers from Megan. I expect them from you. You know what's going on. Either you tell me, or Megan becomes your permanent house guest. Do you understand?" "I understand, Eric. I'll do my best." Helen was in a good mood that morning, full of energy and cheer. I was hoping that was a positive sign. "I've arranged a luncheon for you, Mr. Harper. You'll be meeting Linda Harlan at the Olive Garden at noon. She'll have a table reserved for you when you arrive. I wasn't thrilled about having lunch with Victor Harlan's wife, but I felt like I should. The best I could do was try to be courteous. I glanced over at Helen. Would you like to join me? I'd rather not be alone in this situation. Sorry, boss. I'd be happy to join you for dinner, but lunch isn't my thing. I caught a subtle smile as she walked away. What did she mean by that? I never gave any indication to Helen or anyone else at work that I might be available. That was a clear line I didn't cross. Maybe my status as potentially divorced was starting to get some attention from the women around me. What on earth could Linda Harlan want? Around 10 o'clock, Helen popped her head into my office. There's a Mr. Kyle Benson here to see you. Are you free? No, send him in, I replied. Kyle, married to Nicole, was a big guy with a gentle demeanor. He looked visibly nervous as he walked into my office and took a seat. I gave him a moment, silently waiting for him to speak. Nicole asked me to come see you, Kyle began, his voice shaky. She's worried you'll be angry with her because of what she has to tell you. Kyle, you look like you're about to crack. What's going on? Did I do something to cause this? I asked, trying to understand. No, Eric, it's not you. It's something I did. I lost my temper. It's never happened with Nicole before, and I'm scared. Scared? What could you possibly be afraid of? I think I hurt her, Kyle said, his voice breaking. I hit her pretty hard, Eric. I took her to the hospital, and then I came straight here. I didn't know what else to do. Now, Kyle wasn't some simpleton. He was a smart and resourceful man who had always provided well for his wife and children. His kids were grown and out of the house, but he had always been a good father. I never suspected there were issues in their marriage, and I figured Kyle didn't either. Why don't you start at the beginning, Kyle? We've got all the time you need. No rush, I said. Helen brought in 2 cups of coffee as Kyle took a few deep breaths, trying to calm himself. It only took a few moments before he seemed to relax. You're not going to get mad at me, are you, Eric? He asked nervously. No, I promise I won't lose my temper, I assured him. Nicole told me that Megan had a boyfriend, Victor something. I don't remember his last name. She was at his place when a fire broke out in the garage, and Megan's Corvette got burned up. Megan thinks you started the fire, but the police don't believe her. She's scared to come home now. She tried to over the weekend, but had some sort of breakdown. That's what I was supposed to tell you. I raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound too traumatic. I'm still not sure why that's upsetting you so much. I started asking her a few questions to try and clear things up, Kyle continued. But the more I asked, the angrier Nicole got. What kind of questions? I prompted. Do you remember the 3-day cruise the girls took to Cancun last year? Kyle asked. Yeah, why? I replied, confused. I always felt something was off about that trip, Kyle said. For some reason, I linked that vacation to Megan's affair. I don't know why, but I just did. So, I asked Nicole if Megan had an affair while she was on that cruise, and she completely blew up. I'm guessing you didn't get an answer? I said. Oh, I did, Kyle replied, his voice tight. Not the one I wanted, though. She went on a rant for several minutes about how you and I were less than satisfactory husbands. She said that if we'd been more attentive in the bedroom, there would have been no need for them to cat around. That's the term she used. Cat around. That's when it hit me. Nicole was cheating on me too, just like Megan did to you. I'm sorry, Kyle, I said, feeling guilty. I didn't mean for you to get caught up in all of this. Things took a turn for the worse, Eric, Kyle said, his voice shaky. I kept pushing her to tell me who she was seeing. She laughed and said, which one? That's when I lost it. After I hit her several times, she was scared out of her mind. She'd never seen me like that before. 22 years together, and I'd never been violent until that morning. She begged me to stop, but I told her I wouldn't until she gave me names. She finally told me the 2 guys from the cruise were from their health club, Craig and Will something. That's when she gave me Victor's name as the guy Megan was seeing. I threatened to hit her again if she didn't tell me everything. I didn't care about the guys Megan was with, but I needed to know about the ones she was with. She mentioned Gavin Turner, a guy we went to high school with. Before she could say any more, I hit her again. Then I panicked and took her to the emergency room. After that, I came straight here to see you. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to someone who had just beaten his wife badly enough to send her to the hospital? It seemed like Nicole had misjudged the gentle nature of her husband. She probably would have gotten away with it if she hadn't rubbed it in his face. Big mistake. We sat in silence for a few moments. What now, Kyle? I asked quietly. I don't know, he replied. I think I need help, Eric. Before I could respond, 2 uniformed officers pushed past Helen and walked into the room. "Which one of you bozos is Kyle Benson?" one of them demanded. Kyle raised his hand, and before he could react, the officers quickly slapped the cuffs on him and escorted him out. Helen brought me a fresh cup of coffee as I processed what had just happened. I had Helen contact a lawyer for Kyle before heading out for my lunch with Linda Harlan. When I arrived, Linda had already secured a table, but to my surprise, she wasn't alone. "Mr. Harper, I'm glad you could make it," Linda said, motioning to the man sitting beside her. "This is my friend Tony. He's here as my chaperone and companion." Tony was a large man with a dark complexion, thick hair, and a quiet presence. He sat next to Linda, but not too close. It was hard to gauge the nature of their relationship. The conversation was painfully dull. For reasons I couldn't quite understand, we found ourselves discussing trivial topics like the weather and traffic. When the meals arrived, the silence between us was palpable. It was clear neither of us was eager to bring up the real reason we were meeting. After we finished eating, we both ordered coffee, and then Linda cleared her throat. "My husband's infidelities have been a source of great embarrassment to me, Mr. Harper," Linda began, her voice calm but strained. "Normally, I'm quite good at overlooking his mistakes, but since the divorce, I can see that this was a mistake on my part. There's nothing I can do to undo what's happened, but I can try to prepare you for what might come next. Victor is a violent and vengeful man. If he believes you're the cause of his problems, he will do whatever it takes to get revenge. I know it's all his fault, but he won't see it that way. There's a chance he could manipulate your wife into doing things that you can't even imagine. Even though she loves you, she might be more than willing to help Victor get even. I advise you not to trust her in any way until you're absolutely sure of her loyalty. Do you understand?" I simply nodded, taking in her warning. "I can guarantee that Victor will try to hurt you in some way soon," she continued. "I'm here today to warn you and to tell you to be careful. I'll do what I can to help, but I'm afraid there's little I can do. The reason Tony is with me is because of Victor. Tony is my brother-in-law, and he's here to help protect me until the family can sort out the mess Victor has caused." She paused for a moment, as if waiting for me to speak, but I just shook my head. I had 100 questions swirling in my mind, but I didn't ask any of them. We finished our coffee in silence. Linda insisted on paying the bill, and after a few more words, we went our separate ways. As I walked away, I felt a knot of fear tighten in my stomach. I'd been angry about the situation before, but now I was downright scared. Work was quiet, and Helen was eager to know what had happened at the luncheon, but I wasn't in the mood to talk about it. Kyle's lawyer was busy arranging his bail, and though I felt like I should do something for Nicole, I decided against it. I took the afternoon off and went to Diane's school. It didn't take long to get permission for her to graduate early. In less than an hour, she had turned in her books and cleaned out her locker. She would miss the graduation ceremony, but it didn't seem to bother her. On the way home, I called the office and had Helen sign me out for 2 weeks of vacation. I didn't expect to be gone that long, but having a buffer seemed wise. Diane had already packed most of her things, so loading up the car was quick. Given everything going on, I felt a lot better knowing she'd be 1,000 miles away, safe at school. There was no issue getting her into the dorm early. Old Man Withers, who lived across the street, was more than happy to collect the mail and newspaper while I was gone. The drive to Iowa was long, but with both of us taking turns behind the wheel, it went by quickly. The trip back alone felt much longer, or at least it seemed that way. When I got back home, I realized it was no longer there. All that remained was a heap of charred wood and a lot of yellow tape. I should have given Withers my cell number before I left. It was late, so I decided to get a motel room for the night. I figured there would be plenty of time in the morning to speak with the authorities. Turns out, Linda Harlan really knew her husband. After a hearty breakfast, I called Helen. She said everything at the office was fine, but Victor Harlan had been arrested. She didn't know much more than that, but mentioned I owed her dinner. I then called the Benson house, and Kyle picked up. "Hey, good buddy. Glad to see you're out of jail. I was hoping you could fill me in on what's going on. Why are you still at the house? I thought Nicole would have kicked you out. Eric, are you back home yet? Your house is gone." "Yeah, I know. I had to stay in a motel last night." "Well, you're welcome to come over here." Nicole and Megan moved in with their parents. The only problem is, Megan's in jail right now, along with her boyfriend. "I'll tell you what, Kyle. I'll come by later this afternoon, and you can fill me in on everything." It was shaping up to be a busy day. My first stop was the bank to check if there was any money left. Thankfully, Megan hadn't touched that account. I closed out all my accounts and credit cards, at least securing some cash for myself. I canceled Megan's cell phone, paying the penalty fee, and decided not to bother changing my own number. I figured by now, no one really knew it anyway. Next, I swung by the police department to see if I needed to sign anything or provide more information. A guy in a suit and tie spoke with me for about 20 minutes, and that was that. Withers really came through for me. He'd seen Megan and Victor go into the house. He even took note of Victor's license plate number. Megan carried out a couple of loads of clothing, and then they set the place on fire. They did it late at night, but Withers never missed a thing. For once, I was glad to have such a nosy neighbor. Megan admitted to the police that they were responsible, claiming they did it out of revenge for me supposedly burning down Victor's house. I called Kyle and asked him to meet me at Dreamland Barbecue. I felt like treating him. He filled me in quickly. Nicole wanted a divorce, and Kyle agreed, but only if she dropped the assault charges. They were just waiting for the right time to make it official. As for Megan, I wasn't sure if she wanted a divorce or not, but I knew I did. Nicole and Megan were staying with their parents, but things weren't going smoothly. When their father found out what had been happening, he lost it. Right now, Nicole was recovering at the house, and Megan was in jail, waiting for her dad to post her bail. I had to admit, I was enjoying how things were playing out. I called Diane to tell her about the house. The next morning, Helen was happy to see me, and I caught up with all my work quickly. The company had decided to let Victor go, though I wasn't sure what reason they gave. His buddies in the break room were avoiding me like the plague, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Then Megan's dad called, asking if I could help with her bail. I told him the only way I could come up with the money was through a second mortgage, which I was sure the bank wouldn't approve. He didn't appreciate the sarcasm, but I think he got the point. He must have been desperate to call me. After lunch, I stopped by my lawyer's office to begin the divorce proceedings. I called Megan's dad and told him I'd post her bail, but only if she signed the divorce papers. He seemed relieved by the compromise and said he'd try to convince her. I told him I'd have everything ready by the next afternoon if she agreed. An hour later, he called back with her approval. The insurance company was hesitant about the claim. I insisted that Victor was responsible for burning down the house and that Megan wasn't directly involved, but they didn't buy it. I decided to step back and let them handle it internally. At this point, I was numb and just wanted everything to be over. Out of nowhere, the company offered me a transfer to Huntsville. It was an unexpected move, but a promotion nonetheless, and I appreciated the vote of confidence. Helen said she'd like to come with me. Over the next month, things started to settle down. Nicole healed from the well-deserved beating and gained a newfound respect for her soon-to-be ex-husband. Gavin Turner was found badly beaten behind a local strip club. He either couldn't or wouldn't say who was responsible. Kyle and I joined the local health club that the girls used to attend. 2 days later, 2 regular members decided to quit, so we let our memberships lapse after that. In an unexpected turn, my car insurance company decided to compensate me for the loss of the Corvette. Though I bought it for Megan, it was still in my name. The homeowner's insurance claim is still unresolved. Megan testified against Victor and ended up with 2 years of probation, while Victor received a sentence of 7 to 10 years. Next week, Helen and I are heading to Huntsville. I'd love to share the details of our whirlwind romance, but I'll save that for another time. She's asking me to buy her a 1969 Mustang, and I'm seriously considering it. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.